My name is Zachary McNaughton, and I am not a professional angler. I've been fishing for over 20 years, and the one thing that these years have taught me most is that I have a lot to learn. So let's meet some of Vermont's true master anglers, and together we'll discover some fishing techniques and explore the many species that this great state has to offer. Vermont offers a great diversity of fishing, and most of our ponds and streams are pristine, with very little fishing pressure. One of my favorite species to target in early spring are stocked rainbow trout.
Big old trout.
My favorite time to fish for rainbow trout are when the water temps are between 53 and 58 degrees. The water typically reaches these temperatures after the first 3 or 4 days of 70-degree weather.
Oh, I got a fish.
During this small window of time, the trout are moving up in the water column to actively feed on minnows and other moving prey. During this episode, we'll focus predominantly on stocked rainbow trout. I'll teach you how to use some online resources to figure out when the best time to catch these fish will be.
The Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department stocks about 120,000 rainbow trout into Vermont waters throughout the state each year. Of those fish, about 12,000 of them are part of our trophy trout program, whereas most of the trout that we stock each year are raised in the hatchery for about 1 year. The fish in the trophy trout program stay in the hatchery for a second year and are raised to lengths of about 14 to 16 inches and sometimes reach sizes even greater than that. Rainbow trout are not native to Vermont. Instead, they came to us from the west coast of North America. Trout stocking in Vermont began in 1886 when we introduced rainbow trout to different parts of the state. The Roxbury hatchery was created in the late 1800s to help this stocking, and now we have 5 different hatcheries throughout the state that help provide trout to waters for angling opportunities. Stocking today continues in water bodies that aren't able to sustain natural wild trout populations, often due to habitat limitations such as elevated water temperatures that don't allow wild trout to survive.
Let's take a look at the online stocking schedule. I'll start at google.com and I'll search for Vermont stocking schedule. Press return, and the first search result is usually the correct one. So we'll click on that anrweb.vt.gov link, which will open the Vermont fish stocking schedule. If you click this button at the top of the window that says see what's been stocked, you can take a look at all of the completed stockings. But to start out, let's look at the scheduled stockings. Here you can see that the Black River is scheduled to be stocked on 4 different weeks of the year. They plan on putting 1,500 2-year trophy trout in, as well as an additional 500 2-year trophy brown trout. During this episode, we'll be fishing the Black River, so we'll pay special attention to those week of 4 stocking dates. If you scroll down, you'll see the planned stockings for all of Vermont's trout lakes and streams. Now let's take a look at what's already been stocked. We'll click on the See What's Been Stocked button, which opens this form. Scroll down in the form and change from the default scheduled stockings to completed stockings in the drop-down menu. Click search and our search returns will appear below. The website provides tons of information, including the body of water, the town, the planned number of stocked, and the actual number of stocked, as well as the species and size of the fish. If you take a look at the species code, EKT stands for brook trout, RBT is for rainbow trout, BNT is for brown trout, LAT is for lake trout, and STT is for steelhead trout. There are a ton of ways to narrow your search results. For this example, let's select a specific county to look at completed stockings for. From the county list, I'm going to select Windham County, and then we'll click search. The results below will be only the completed fish stockings for Windham County. You'll want to pay special attention to the date stocked portion of this form. Ideally, we'll hit the body of water within 3 or 4 days of a stocking for maximum results. The state updates this website typically within 24 to 48 hours of stocking. That means if you want to play this game right, you're going to need to check this website on a daily basis to find out when the prime window for fishing your preferred body of water is. It's mid-May. We're heading down to the Black River today. They've recently stocked with trophy browns and trophy rainbow trout, so hopefully we'll get into something. We're going to be using 2.5-inch floating jerkbaits, and the reason for that is they are really easy to get out of the rocks. I used to fish a lot on the river with spinners, and I found that they would drop down between rocks and get stuck, and I was always losing them, and so I switched to the jerkbaits, and it's fantastic. If you get snagged, you just give a little slack in your line, the current picks up the lure, drifts it back downstream, and then you can continue to reel it in.
Rainbow trout tend to be pretty generalist in terms of what they eat at times. In river systems, they tend to eat any aquatic or terrestrial insects that might be drifting by them.
River trout like to hang out in current seams along the edges of fast-moving water. These current seams and eddies can be found just behind large rocks, along the edges of narrow runs, and at the bottom of deep holes. Ideally, you'll want to bring your lure across the front of these hot spots as the trout orient themselves facing upstream while actively feeding in current.
Oop, there was a bump. There it is. Oh, take it.
When still water fishing, casting is most productive immediately after a stock, or when you see an unusual amount of surface activity.
There.
Casting can also be productive at the mouth of a river feeding a lake.
Just pay attention to those ripples. If you see one, try not to land your lure right in the ripple. Try to land it a little ways beyond it, okay? There it is.
And in lake and pond systems, they tend to eat either zooplankton or also benthic organisms that they might be able to find. Sometimes the larger rainbow trout will also become piscivorous and begin to eat other fish as well.
When fishing for trout in lakes and ponds, I prefer to use an inline spinner such as a Joe's fly. Inline spinners put off a lot of flash and vibration, which calls the trout in from a ways, and in deeper water there's much less risk of snagging and losing the lure. When using these lures for trout, it's important to move them through the water as slowly as you possibly can while still getting the blades on the spinner to turn. When fishing lakes and ponds, sometimes the trout like to follow the lure a long ways before committing to a bite. Oftentimes this results in the fish following the lure all the way to the boat and then turning away when they see you.
Oop, there was a hit.
If you start to notice this happening, it's probably time to switch to trolling. Trolling's a great technique to use when fish are few and far between, and you need to cover a lot of water in order to find them.
Oh, right there! Just say, right out from under your boat. Yeah, baby! This is my kind of fishing, man. Ooh, chunk.
I typically start out by trolling large circles in a lake or pond. Then you can narrow down the lake to the areas that seem to be most productive for bites and shift your focus just to those areas.
Alright, here's the countdown from 10. Ready? 10. Oh, I gotta get the lure started first. Hold on. It's only fair once. Oh, never mind. Got one. I didn't even get to count.
This technique can be extremely productive during the last couple of hours before sundown. You may find that they follow the lure, pecking at it now and then for quite a distance before really committing to a solid strike. As you can see here, trolling for trout can be done extremely low-tech. I use my life vest to hold the rod, and if I detect a strike, I'll lean backwards to impart a bit of an injured baitfish action into the lure, which usually seals the deal.
I guess it's not so tiny, it was just swimming at me.
Stock rainbow trout and trout in general provide a great opportunity for anglers to harvest the fish that they catch. The stock fish that we put in are raised on really high quality diets in the hatcheries, and then when they're put in the river, provide a great opportunity for an angler to take home what they caught in a day. We encourage anglers to harvest the fish that they catch and keep them to provide this opportunity to have a wild caught meal.
I'm going to start with a sharp knife. My first incision will be right behind the gill plate. I'll cut down to the bone. Then, just keeping the tip of the knife along the lateral line of the fish, I'll cut along the bones all the way down to the anal fin, at which point I will bend the knife and come through the opposite side of the fish.
Keeping the knife angled downward, I'll continue the cut until it's free. Now, it's time to cut the pin bones. These are the most difficult part, but once we get through the pin bones, the rest of the fillet will zip right off the fish. Now, I don't like to completely separate this. I'll leave it on there and flip the fish over to hold the fish's shape for my next side's cut. So basically just repeat the process. We'll cut down, we'll take a 90-degree, cut along that lateral line, poke through to the anal fin, and then we'll zip this fillet off of the bones. And this time I'll completely separate the fillet from the bone, and then I'll separate it out here, lay it aside, and we'll flip the fish around and we'll separate that first fillet from the bone. Now we can discard the body of the fish, which is just the waste products, the guts. I didn't have to gut anything, everything's right in there. Now I'll trim up the fillet, I'll remove this excess skin, flip it around, do the same on the other side, and repeat for the other fillet. After a quick rinse, I'll start the process of removing all the pin bones to make this a completely boneless cut. So I'll find the pin bones. They are angled towards the top of the fish, so I'll match the angle of the pin bones with the knife just under them, and I'll cut all the way down to the skin. Cut just below the pin bones all the way down till you're sure you're past the last pin bone. You can tell by just rubbing your finger along the fillet, and you'll feel when the pin bones end. Once you've got all of the pin bones down to the skin, we're going to make a parallel cut on the top side. So now we'll cut on the top side of the pin bones right down to the skin, following the same process all the way down to the last pin bone. Now you'll have a strip of meat that has just all the pin bones in it. So we'll put our knife back down to the skin of the fillet, we'll turn it, and we'll just cut along the skin so that we can remove that thin strip of meat. We will lose a little bit of meat, but it's well worth not having to chew and pick out those pin bones while we're eating it, or just the stress of being nervous about eating a bone. And that's how to boneless fillet a rainbow trout.
Thanks for watching this episode of Vermont Master Anglers. For more content, visit our Facebook page at Vermont Master Anglers. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like and subscribe.